Hello, hello. Welcome to Flute Q&A number 22. I remember being 22. That was a good age. So I'm a flute teacher. My name is Jane Kavanagh. I'm Australian and I love teaching flute players how to get faster progress through proper technique. Faster progress through proper technique, that means learning little tweaks of the right way to play the flute, which makes playing so much easier and sounds so much better. So the students in the Flute Academy that I run, the online Flute Academy, that's exactly what they learn step by step. So if you're in the Flute Academy, hi, nice to have you on this Q&A. Okay, our questions today, there's 5, come from Candi, Lee, Sylke, and Andrew, and Lance. That's 5. All right, here we go. The first question from Candi is, what can a flutist do on an open hole flute that cannot be achieved on a closed one? That's a really good question, Candi. So if anyone's going, oh, what hold flute? My flute is an open hold flute. So there's 5 holes in the keys. So here, here, and then here, here, here. So there's 5 holes in the keys and your fingers cover the holes, kind of like a clarinet. Actually, kind of nothing like a clarinet, but clarinets have holes in their keys and they have to close the holes to be able to play the clarinet properly. Did I say clarinet or flute? But you know what I mean. So you need to cover these holes for the flute to actually work properly. So Candi's question is, what can you do on an open hold flute as opposed to a closed hold flute? Behind your question, Candi, you might be thinking, why would I bother getting an open hold flute if you just have to make more effort to close them, to close the holes when you play? So there's a few reasons. When you buy an open hold flute from a flute shop, they'll probably tell you that it improves your tone quality. Now, it does marginally. It more helps with the projection of the sound rather than the actual tone quality. However, there are better ways to improve your tone quality than getting an open hold flute. It's so marginal that's not a reason to get one. But I like playing an open hold flute because you can hear that more projection of the sound. Plus, from a tactile point of view, I love the feel of having my fingers over the holes, closing the holes. Now, another reason that you can want an open hold flute is because you can do things like microtones. So I just cracked this open. I went like that when I played this key. I moved it open. And I actually did it to 2 keys. So my left hand here. So I did it to both of those keys at the same time. The G key I went first and then to the A key. And you go... and you get this slide. Now that's handy for doing little slides if you're playing jazz music. It doesn't come up very often in classical. Actually, pretty much not at all in classical, unless you're playing contemporary classical music, like with extended techniques. 100% it's useful for that. So if you're playing extended technique or contemporary classical music with extended techniques like that, you need an open hold flute for that. I don't play that sort of music very often, so I don't actually use it for that. What I use it mostly for, the 2 reasons why I have an open hold flute is, one, I like the feel of it. And the second reason is I like being able to do emergency intonation. So if I'm playing along and you've got a high D and you work really hard as a flute player to be able to play in tune, so have good intonation. But sometimes depending on the chord that you're playing, so if you've got the major third of a chord, so let's say it's a B flat major chord. Oh, sorry, other way around. If you're playing a minor chord and the D is the minor third of a chord, so B, D, F sharp. If you play a D, if you've got that note in the chord, it's going to naturally, like from a physics, acoustics point of view, it's going to be too flat. So you need to raise it. So the minor, this is another topic altogether. But if you have the third of a chord and it's a minor third, it's going to sound too flat, so you need to raise it. If you have the major third of a chord, you know, when you're playing a chord with a band or something, the major third is going to sound too sharp and you need to flatten it. So they both sort of need to go, the minor third needs to come up and the major third needs to go down for it to actually sound in tune. Now, if you were to play that note, so it's say a D, in isolation, it can be perfectly in tune with a tuner, but when you're playing in a chord, well, we're going down a rabbit hole here. If you're playing it as part of a chord, you need to be able to adjust your intonation so that it sounds in tune. The tuner will say that it's not in tune, just that note, but part of a chord, it will be in tune. So violinists do this all the time because they have that flexibility to adjust their intonation to suit the chord. Now, there was a reason I was telling you that. Oh, that's right. This D on the flute is naturally flat. I think actually the notes around it are naturally sharp and it just sounds flat. But for practical purposes, it always feels flat when you're playing it. And when that D happens to be in a B minor chord and it's the minor third, it's going to be flat because it's naturally flat on the flute and flat because it's the minor third. And so we need to raise it. Short story. Oh my God, that just got complicated. If your brain just exploded, sorry. So the short story is that I love being able to go on a D. Is that the only reason I've got an open hold flute? No, because I can do it on other notes as well. So watch my right hand. I'm just cracking one of these fingers here, and it lifts the pitch up for that E, which is often a bit of a flat note as well, especially when you play it quietly. Oh, Candi, I did not expect or plan to go down that rabbit hole. But if you're listening to this or anyone else listening to this, I hope that was interesting because I find it fascinating how you can play a note that the tuner says it's in tune, but when you're in a chord, you actually have to adjust the tuning. So there you go. Oh, Candi, I did a video called How to Play an Open Hold Flute. I'll put a link below your question in case you would like to watch that. There is another reason why open hold flutes are quite good. It encourages good hand position because you have to cover the holes. So you can't get away with playing like this with your fingers over the keys or your fingers to, not that you ever play like this, but maybe like this or just hanging over, or maybe this finger's like a bit like this, but more likely it's probably like this. You can't get away with any of that because you have to close the holes. I changed to an open hole flute when I was 16. So I started playing when I was 8, and then when I was 16, I got a good flute, and it was open hold, and I went, what? I couldn't play because it sounds like this. If you don't cover the holes, that's what happened to me. So it helped me fix my hand position when I was 16. So I really encourage people to get an open hold flute when they've been playing for quite a few years and they're becoming a good intermediate flute player. Beginner flutes almost never, or they should never, have open hole flutes. Like really beginner flutes should never be open hole because there's enough to think about without having to cover the hole. You can get like really good beginner flutes that have open holes, and the students can plug them up until they're ready to expose the holes and be able to cover them with their fingers. However, professional flutes aren't always open hole. They nearly always are, but not necessarily. I've seen professional flute players play on closed hole flutes. I don't know why. It's just a personal preference, but there you go. Candi, that was quite a big answer. Hope that was helpful. The next question is much shorter. It comes from Lee. And he says, if this is the Lee I'm thinking of, it's a he. And he says, I received an email from Jane, that's me, about how to memorize scales. Now I can't find it. Can you please send me the link? Now, if it's the Lee that I'm thinking of, you're in the Flute Academy. And what you're talking about is the February this year, 2022, technique workshop inside the Flute Academy. Every month inside the Flute Academy, there's a new technique workshop showing you something new. And in February, it was how to memorize scales. So Lee, if you're the Lee that I'm thinking of, just log into the Flute Academy and you'll see it there in the technique workshops area. The next question comes from Sylke from Germany. She says, hi Jane, I only started to play the C flute 4 years ago and have never played another one. So I'm wondering what's the difference between a bass flute in to a bass flute in playing, holding, etc. Thanks for your great work. Oh, thank you, Sylke. That's very nice of you to say. So when you say bass flute, there's actually an alto flute. Hang on, I'll keep this up. There's actually an alto flute, which is about that long, and then a bass flute, which is actually it's twice as long because it's an octave lower. And conversely, the piccolo, which is 1 octave exactly higher, is exactly half the length. Now, there's a little caveat here. A piccolo doesn't have a C foot. If it had a low C note on a piccolo, it would be exactly half the length of a flute. Bass flutes are exactly 1 octave lower, so they're exactly twice as long. And alto flutes are in between. I have seen alto flutes described on music as bass flutes, and it completely confused the beep out of me. Because I remember this. This is when I was at uni. I was playing in the orchestra, and my part said bass flute. And I went looking everywhere to see where I could borrow a bass flute. Couldn't find a bass flute anywhere. And then someone pointed out to me that it actually meant alto flute. I don't know why, but anyway. So alto flute is in the key, alto flute is in the key of G. And so when you play a low C on the alto flute, it sounds like a G lower. So it plays a fourth below. The bass flute, if you play a low C, it sounds an octave lower. So that will give you an idea about how low an alto flute and how low a bass flute is. So the alto flute is a transposing instrument, and the C flute, as you said, Sylke, and also the bass flute are in the key of C, which means they're not a transposing instrument. Anything in the key of C, like a piano, a violin, a trombone, they're not transposing instruments. They're in the key of C, or otherwise known as concert pitch. So if you're wondering what Sylke meant by I played the C flute, that's the concert flute, and it's in the key of C. C does not refer to the word concert. That's just a coincidence. It's in the key of C. All right. So more to your question, I really want to borrow an alto flute and a bass flute, and then do a video comparing them. So I own a piccolo, so I could do a video on piccolo, flute, alto flute, and bass flute. That would be quite fun. But I don't own alto or bass, so you'll just have to wait for that. The reason alto and bass flutes exist, obviously because they play lower, but they're much stronger and mellower in those lower notes than a normal flute. Now, difference in playing them. Alto flute, the ones I have played in the past have a straight head joint, and so you actually play like this. The holes are much further apart. Your fingers can't spread like that, so they have keys that extend they have little extensions on the keys so that you can actually play with a normal human hand position, and you don't have to try and do this. Because they're not covering the holes, the keys just close the holes for you. Speaking of open hole flutes from before, connecting the two, you won't find an alto flute or a bass flute that has open holes, because the holes in the keys need to be over the holes in the tube, and they don't align on an alto or a bass flute because the holes are so much further apart because the tube is so much longer. So the alto flutes I've played actually just feels kind of like that, and then your head's up here, so it's like quite long. You can get them with curved heads as well, curved head joints, and it's much more comfortable. I've seen some like that and some with straight heads. Bass flute, it's always a curved head joint, because if you can imagine a tube twice as long as this, there's no way you could play that. So it's fatter, it's longer, and it has a curved head joint. The bass flute, as for comfort of playing Sylke, the bass flute that I played, it was actually a plastic bass flute. This is the most recent bass flute that I've played. And it had a good sound. It was great to play, except my right hand. Oh my God, it was so painful to play with my right hand up here. So I think it was a low quality bass flute. I mean, it was plastic, so it's going to be low quality. And I think that just the ergonomics is probably the word, or the construction or the design of this part down here was just not crash hot. So that's why it hurt my hand. It's not supposed to hurt your hand. And alto flute I've found fine. And it's mostly because of the extensions on the keys that just mean that you can actually hold it like a normal flute rather than trying to do that. Let's see if I wrote anything else for you. No. That's it, Sylke. That's everything. You can go and watch oh no, wait, I was about to say you can go and watch the video if you want, but that was for the open hold flute. Okay, the next question comes from, he's written Andrew Joel. So I'm not sure if your name is Andrew or Andrew Joel, but hi. I've been playing the bamboo flute for 5 months and sometimes I don't get a clear sound for the high notes. I think it is mainly due to my embouchure being rather round. My upper lip comes forward. You're spot on, Andrew. If your embouchure is round like this, that's more round than what I would normally play. The hole in your mouth is bigger. It means your air is going to be coming up in droves. I was going to say your air is going to be coming out, not faster. More air is going to be coming out. And when you play high notes, it's just not going to be possible for you to get those high notes because so much air is coming out at once and you're going to run out before you can actually play your high notes. And the reason that it's a fluffy sound up high is because a bigger hole makes a fluffier sound. So the smaller your hole, the clearer your sound is going to be just inherently because you're not wasting air. When you waste air, it makes it a fluffy sound. So basically think of it as like a refined, small needle airstream. That's what gets you a clear sound. If you haven't done the free course, Andrew, the free mini course, I'll link to it below for you. It's a 3-day mini course, how to instantly improve your sound on the flute. You might have already done it because you've said you think it's because your embouchure is rather round, and we talk about that in the mini course. So you might have already done it, which is really good. It's really good that you've done it and that you've identified that your embouchure is round. Now work on making it less round and getting a much smaller hole, and you'll find high notes are much easier as well. In addition to needing a refined hole for high notes, you need I call it the real way of playing high notes. And it's a very, very slight embouchure technique. It's probably, if your embouchure is already round, the way I teach high notes is to have a good embouchure like, say this, not too round. And the way I teach high notes, you go from a normal embouchure like that, or a standard embouchure, and you push the corners forward a little bit in your mouth. That is the second module in the 45-day flute transformation, which is part of the Flute Academy. The second module is all about mastering the real way of playing high notes and how to incorporate into your playing so that you do it naturally and you don't really need to think about it. It just happens naturally, like by habit, instinct. No, not instinct, habit. There's nothing instinctual about playing high notes on a tube. I was going to say something. Yes, you also said that your upper lip comes forward. I'm thinking like that. It could be for a couple of reasons. One, maybe you just have a bigger upper lip and your teeth naturally come forward and you'll just need to compensate for that with your lips. But be careful that when you play, you don't pull your bottom jaw back and force that to come over. So just be aware of when you're playing your bamboo flute that you're not pulling your jaw back. It's no good for your embouchure and it's no good for your jaw. You'll end up giving yourself some jaw pain. Okay, I'm going to put my headband on because my hair's getting in my face. The last question comes from Lance. Hi, Lance. It's funny I just said hi, Lance, because the first word is hi, Jane. It's like you heard me. What do you do to keep your lips from chapping during the winter? This seems to be affecting my tone and I'm trying various lip balms. Suggestions would be most welcome. Thank you, from Canada. I'm glad that you said that you're from Canada because I actually think you're going to be the expert on how to manage extreme winters. Winter in Sydney is not anything like winter in Canada, obviously. It does get cold, contrary, if you've never been here, it actually does get cold and it gets windy and you do get chapped lips. Nowhere near to the extent that I'm sure you experience in Canada. So I think that you're going to be the expert in finding out which lip balm helps you. The 2 tips I have for you is stay hydrated, drink enough water. I know if I haven't drunk enough water, my lips get dry, 100%. And then the other thing is when they do get dry, maybe because I haven't drunk enough water or it's been quite windy and I've been outside, I lip balm and then do what you're doing with the lip balm. But then when I come to play, I wipe it off very classily with the back of my hand so that the lip balm doesn't go over the flute. And that seems to work. Good luck, and I'll see you all in the next flute. Let me try that again. I will see you all in the next flute Q&A. See you later.